So, hello everyone, this is Kelly Whitley from Plaxo Secretariat in Costa Rica. I'm joined today by special guest Dr. Andy Williamson, who is a digital strategist, founder of Future Digital, and fellow at Hampshire Society in the UK. Thank you, Dr. Williamson, for joining us today.
Hi.
So, Dr. Williamson, as you know, here at Plaxo, we are, as a part of what we are working on, we're examining e-democracy efforts in Latin America, and through that, we're speaking with international experts such as yourself in the field to understand their insights and experiences so that we can basically, take that great information and apply it to our own work. So with that being said, could you just talk a minute about some of your experiences in the area of electronic democracy?
Well, I've worked through quite a number of areas, from the grassroots, looking at how communities can better engage in local government and in consultations at central government level, to the other side, which is looking at how government departments and parliaments can use technology to get the pulse of the people, to find out what the public actually thinks about what they're doing, and to get submissions to the policy process.
Great. And kind of through those experiences, what are some interesting tendencies that you've observed regarding e-democracy and e-government in the UK?
Well, I think there's a few patterns that become fairly obvious. One is there's still quite a resistance to using technology, and it comes from two problems. One is a lack of understanding about what the technology can do, and the other is there is a resistance to changing how the policy process has worked. Digital lets you engage people earlier on, but quite often there isn't a great deal of enthusiasm for doing that. So it's important that you cut through those barriers within government departments.
Sure.
On the public side, the biggest barrier, the biggest problem perhaps you're going to encounter there is trust. The public just doesn't trust what government's doing, and doing something digitally doesn't necessarily make you trust them anymore. In fact, often it gives you that initial enthusiasm for, hey, great, this is something we can do, we can see what's happening. Oh, look, nothing's happened as a result of it. So you get even more disillusioned.
Right. Great. Well, it seems that those are some of the challenges that the UK is facing with respect to really kind of fully engaging both its citizenry and the government itself in kind of a true participatory process online. So with that being said, what are some case studies or some some aspects of e-democracy that you've seen that you could point to as being something that other governments could look at as they start to, or civil society actors, as they start to really turn to this in earnest in their own right?
Yeah, I think there are some good examples. One of the things about e-democracy is you can do it at a number of levels. So if we start at the very basic, the National Assembly for Wales and the Scottish Parliament have been very successful in the way they've used e-petitions. Now, e-petitions are not the greatest piece of e-democracy. They're not really that participatory. They get, sometimes they get described as being sort of democracy light. But actually, they're an important on-ramp, if you like, for democracy. They do let people take part in a very easy way. And the key there is the process behind them. So if you can show that the process is effective and that actually there's a consequence to the action that you took. Wales is a good example at the moment. They've just passed a law to ban plastic bags in shops, and that came directly from an e-petition. So it shows there is actually a value in doing that. At other levels, there are some good examples of where we've seen the government start to respond to electronic submissions to petitions, but also at the way that Parliament uses electronic submissions to select committees as well. So instead of having to write big, long, formal documents, you can make a video and send it. There's limited examples of that in the UK, but it's starting to happen. And I think perhaps the third example is the use of third-party websites and social media as a tool for engagement. So traditionally you've got the fortress of government where government says, come and tell us what you think, and you look at it and think this is intimidating. Much better they go somewhere like Mumsnet, which is a social network, if you like, for parents, or if it's about finance, they use a thing called moneysavingexpert.com. And that's a website where people interested in finance go
and you kind of started along this road in your answer that you just gave, but what are some ways that you see civil society playing a role in e-democracy, whether it's in the UK or just in an ideal, reality?
I think civil society is really important, and it's a two-way process, and all too often governments see that almost they're doing us a favour by doing something online, but we've really got to drive it the other way. The government has a duty to do things online, because it has a duty to do things in the way that's the most engaging, the most accessible. Great example in New Zealand recently, just had a general election in New Zealand. There's a site called vote.co.nz, which allows you to put questions to the politicians tackling your election about what they think about specific policy issues. Really great example. That actually came out of a local government organisation. Examples in the UK, like They Work For You, makes it easier to find out what Parliament is doing about the things you're interested in. And perhaps it's not enough, but I think there are some really good examples around of just, these are things that have come out of civil society groups, quite often small groups of activists, and have really added value. And as we get more and more into governments opening up data sets and making data accessible to the public, we have this problem of data isn't accessible to the general public because of the skills that you need to use it. So increasingly, we're going to need activists and people working on the civil society side to be able to manage that data, analyse it, and present it in ways that the public can use. Once you start doing that, you start leveling the playing field a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And then our last question today is, kind of, I don't know, a hopeful one, but what do you see for, hopefully it's a hopeful one, what do you see for the future of e-democracy, again, whether it's in England or internationally?
I think the future's really very much in balance at the moment. We've got to get more people online. Until we're all online, it's not democratic. There are people being even more excluded now because they don't have the internet and they don't have the information literacy. So I think we've got to get over the digital exclusion issue. We've got to get the information literacy issue sorted out, and we've got to get the cultural shift in government sorted out so that we actually start presenting democracy as something that everyone can take part in and not as a reserve for the entitled and the usual suspects. Now, once we start overcoming those, we've got the tools and the technology, we've got the networks, and now we've got the data, that it becomes really exciting. Communities now are empowered to do things for themselves. They've got access to the network so they can connect up, not just within their own community, but with other communities anywhere in the world that are facing similar issues. They've got access to the data so they can look at what the real policy issues are and what the numbers are behind the policies and start putting in solid suggestions that are actually based on data and real evidence instead of the standard submission of I don't want it because I don't want it. It doesn't really work in a policy setting, but I don't want it because I can show here's a set of data that shows that if we do this it will be the wrong outcome for this community. That's really powerful. So for me, the real positive is making communities much more empowered, much more able to present their views, but also much more interconnected, so we can share our ideas and our success stories and learnings across much wider communities, geographic and subject-based.
Sure. Well, again, thank you very much for your time, and we will just certainly look forward to, what happens in this field, and we'll be watching.